years I've been trying to get my very good friend from way back, Clark Gable, to make his TV debut on our show.
For decades, they were seen as flawless Hollywood legends whose beauty lit up the screen. But behind the glamour, some of the biggest stars carried secrets no camera could hide. From foul breath to days without bathing, their off-screen habits shocked even their co-stars. What really went on behind closed doors in the golden age of Hollywood? And how did the industry hide what fans were never meant to see? Join us as we uncover the dirty truth behind the silver screen. Number 10. Clark Gable. He had the swagger, the looks, and the voice that helped define the golden age of cinema. On screen, Clark Gable was the ultimate romantic hero, confident, charismatic, and calm under pressure. But behind the scenes, there was one thing he couldn't charm his way out of. By age 32, nearly every one of his natural teeth was gone. Not from a stunt gone wrong or some tragic accident, but from a brutal gum disease known today as periodontitis. Back then, treatment options were limited, and the infection left him with no choice but to have most of his teeth removed. What followed was a painful hospital stay and a quiet recovery in Canada, far from the flashing lights of Hollywood. But the worst part wasn't the surgery. It was what came after. His dentures, crude by today's standards, never fit quite right. They were uncomfortable, constantly shifting, and made simple things, like speaking or eating, a challenge. And then there was the breath. Word spread quickly in Hollywood. Gable's halitosis was the stuff of legend. Close-up scenes with him weren't just emotionally intense, they were physically demanding to endure. Even his co-stars struggled. While filming It Started in Naples, Sophia Loren, a global beauty icon in her own right, reportedly kept her distance whenever the camera wasn't rolling. She wasn't alone. Many of his leading ladies found the reality of working with Gable far less romantic than what audiences saw on screen. What made it all worse? He refused to use breath mints or mouthwash, claiming it would interfere with his performance. Whether that was stubbornness or method acting taken too far, it meant that the issue never really went away. On the set of The Misfits, his final film, crew members recalled that the odor was so intense that you didn't even need to stand next to him to notice. But no one said a word. His status in Hollywood was untouchable, and everyone knew it. If Gable's breath could knock out co-stars, the next icon on our list would have habits that were so shocking, even if he was reportedly disgusted. Number 9. Marilyn Monroe. She was the face of 1950s glamour, flawless skin, red lips, and an image so carefully polished it defined a generation. But behind that soft voice and dazzling smile was a reality that broke the illusion. Despite her on-screen perfection, Monroe was said to have little concern for basic hygiene. According to several accounts, including those around the set of The Misfits, her habits didn't align with her reputation. She often skipped baths, avoided deodorant, and rarely wore undergarments. For some, the contrast was hard to ignore. Clark Gable, who co-starred with her and was known for his obsession with cleanliness despite his bad oral hygiene, but her lack of hygiene reportedly put him off. Despite rumors of chemistry between them, insiders said Gable had no interest. He simply couldn't get past the smell. That shows how hard it must have been. Her longtime makeup artist, Alan Whitey Snyder, had to work around it. He carried baby wipes and heavy powder in his kit, using them to freshen her up between takes. He was trusted with her look, but also became the one to manage what others wouldn't mention out loud. Even the wardrobe staff, who handled her clothing daily, noticed. What the public saw on screen was an illusion that required constant maintenance and quiet adjustments behind the scenes. If Marilyn Monroe's hygiene shattered the illusion of Hollywood glamour, The next man took things to an entirely different level. Number 8. Howard Hughes. As Howard Hughes's influence grew, so did his obsession with germs. What started as a mild quirk eventually took over his entire life. He isolated himself in dark hotel rooms, stopped bathing, and avoided physical contact. Howard's fingernails grew long, his hair went untouched, and his feet were covered with tissue boxes instead of shoes. Those closest to him watched as his routines became more disturbing. Howard would spend long hours in silence, surrounded by jars of urine, unwilling to leave his room or interact with others unless necessary. And yet, while he let himself slip into total neglect, his standards for women remained brutally rigid. According to those who knew him, even a small blemish on a woman's skin was enough for him to lose interest. He demanded flawlessness in others while sinking into filth, a contradiction that exposed the deeper issues hidden behind his wealth and fame. The contrast was especially jarring for those who remembered his early days. In the 1930s, he was known for his fresh suits, clean shaves, and changing his shirt multiple times daily. Assistants recalled how every towel and bar of soap had to be untouched, and hand-washing was a precise, ritualistic task. By the 1940s, the transformation was impossible to ignore. The man who once set standards now avoided daylight, human contact, and even basic hygiene. What remained was a shell of the icon he used to be, driven by fear, locked in isolation, and consumed by a need for control that he could never satisfy. While Hughes locked himself away from the world, the next star was trapped in it by fame, addiction, and a total breakdown of self-care. Number 7. Judy Garland. Early on, Judy Garland was pushed into a cycle of pills and exhaustion. MGM gave her amphetamines to keep her working, and barbiturates to make her sleep. By her teens, her body was already paying the price. Her skin suffered, and her energy faded. Basic hygiene, like bathing and brushing, often fell by the wayside. As her addiction deepened in the 1940s, the cracks became harder to hide. She'd show up to set looking worn down, her breath heavy with alcohol and cigarettes, her clothes sometimes unwashed. Makeup teams were left to clean her up and make her camera ready. Her teeth began to rot, part neglect, part damage from medication. By the time A Star Is Born was in production, even bathing had to be scheduled. Judy's husband, Sid Luft, reportedly brought in someone to ensure she cleaned up before scenes. Some days, she showed up polished and poised. Other days, she hadn't bathed in days, and her condition mirrored her mental state. In her final film, I Could Go On Singing, co-star Dirk Bogarde saw both sides. He described a woman who could be radiant and professional one day, then nearly unreachable the next. Like many others, he saw that this wasn't laziness, but suffering. Judy's hygiene fell apart under pressure, but the next legend let himself rot away behind rhinestones and rock and roll. Number 6. Elvis Presley. As fame grew and control slipped, certain truths became harder to hide. One of the world's most celebrated performers, known for his style and stage presence, carried a private struggle that few dared to mention. He was meticulous about his hair, often spending hours styling it with dye, wax, and pomade. But behind that polished image, his dental hygiene was falling apart. As his use of painkillers and sedatives increased, brushing became irregular. His teeth yellowed, and his breath turned sour. By the mid-1960s, co-stars began to take notice. During the filming of Girl Happy, Marianne Mobley admitted that their on-screen kisses were far from pleasant. While filming Paradise Hawaiian Style a year later, Susanna Lee found ways to avoid real contact during scenes, holding her breath, turning her head slightly, and doing whatever she could to keep the illusion intact. The contradiction was hard to ignore. He cared deeply about his image, yet ignored the basic upkeep that held it together. Crew members noticed, but no one said a word. His fame left the problem untouched. By the 1970s, things had worsened. During his Vegas shows, makeup teams were tasked not just with covering signs of aging or weight gain, but masking deeper hygiene issues linked to his drug use. His once sharp attention to detail had faded. He no longer cared how he looked from certain angles or if his clothes were perfectly fitted. In the final years, even basic self-care was lost. By the time of his death, the distance between who he was and who the world believed him to be had never been wider. If Elvis's decline was tragic, the next star's hygiene was a choice, and he wore his stench like a rebellion. Number 5. Marlon Brando. Without a doubt, Marlon Brando changed acting forever and redefined what it meant to be a leading man. But as time went on, his off-screen habits became harder to ignore. Once merely careless, his hygiene grew steadily worse with age and fame. Co-stars began to complain. On set, he often refused to bathe or wear deodorant. Directors had to work around the discomfort, and crew members found it difficult to shoot scenes with him for long stretches. The issue had become unavoidable by the time Apocalypse Now was in production. His weight had increased, his behavior grew unpredictable, and his body odor made close interactions unpleasant. What was once considered a brooding rebellion now looked like total disregard. Early in his career, Marlon never seemed interested in Hollywood's polished image. Even during A Streetcar Named Desire, a film that launched him to sex symbol status, he had to be told repeatedly to clean up before scenes. Vivian Leigh, his co-star, reportedly struggled with their physical scenes due to the smell. The sweat-soaked shirt in the iconic Stella. The scene wasn't a costume choice, it was just how he showed up that day. As his influence grew, so did his indifference. During The Godfather, makeup artists had to spend extra time making him presentable. Playing an aging Don may have helped hide some issues on screen, but behind the scenes, it added stress to an already complex shoot. His habits didn't just reflect rebellion, they made the job harder for everyone around him. But if Brando's funk was deliberate, the next man was too drunk and soaked in whiskey sweat to care. Number 4. Errol Flynn. Heavy drinking was a constant in Errol Flynn's life, and over time, it took a toll not just on his health, but on his hygiene. As his alcohol use grew, so did the physical signs. His breath often reeked by midday, and his sweat carried the sour scent of liquor. Co-stars found it challenging to work closely with him. He habitually wore the same clothes for days, sometimes even sleeping in them. The result was a strong, lingering odor that made even short scenes uncomfortable. The wardrobe staff took notice. On later productions, Errol's costumes were designed with removable panels, so parts could be cleaned between takes without delaying the shoot, something usually done only for stunt work. As the years passed, his condition worsened. Notes from the costume department grew more frequent, reflecting the need for constant cleaning. Despite the image of a swashbuckling hero, Errol's upkeep declined steadily with his drinking. Only a few people around him knew how to handle it without causing embarrassment. Olivia de Havilland, one of his longtime co-stars, was among them. Instead of confronting him directly, she casually offered mouthwash before scenes, framing it as a suggestion to help the moment play better on screen. It was a small fix for a bigger problem, but it allowed him to save face, while those around him managed what the audience never saw. Flynn's sweat came from hard living, but the next star? His grime was part of the act. Number 3. James Dean James rarely bathed, wore the same clothes for days, and thought little about how he smelled. During Rebel Without a Cause, complaints from the crew forced the director to speak with him privately about his odor. Natalie Wood, his co-star, kept things professional during their scenes, but her discomfort during close moments didn't go unnoticed. His hygiene issues weren't just rebellion. They were part habit, part lifestyle. Friends from his early days in New York said his apartment often had no hot water, making it hard to keep clean. However, the habit stayed even after he moved to Hollywood and had access to better living conditions. On the set of East of Eden, director Elia Kazan, who had already dealt with unconventional actors, still had to bring up the issue when filming in tight spaces. Dean's idea of authenticity extended to his clothes. He believed his worn leather jacket and dirty red socks gave him a more real, grounded look. The socks, in particular, were treated like a lucky charm. He wore them for weeks. What some saw as gritty realism, others saw as neglect. But for Dean, it wasn't about comfort. It was part of the image he had built and refused to let go of. Dean's dirty streak was edgy. But the next man blurred the line between character and reality. Not in a good-smelling way. Number 2. Charlie Chaplin. Few figures in film history were as instantly recognizable as the man behind the bowler hat and cane. The messy clothes, scruffy shoes, and unkempt look of the little tramp became part of Charlie Chaplin's legacy. But the line between character and creator wasn't always clear. Behind the scenes, those close to Chaplin often noted that his hygiene could be inconsistent, especially during intense work periods. Lita Gray, his second wife, claimed during their bitter divorce that he rarely bathed and neglected personal cleanliness throughout their marriage. While some of her claims may have been colored by anger, others who worked closely with Chaplin quietly confirmed similar habits. When he was deep into directing, writing, or editing, bathing and grooming fell down his list of priorities. But no one dared challenge him. Chaplin held total creative control, and studios knew there was no replacing him. In public, however, he could flip the switch. He appeared well-dressed, polished, and put together at premieres and formal events, nothing like the disheveled character he played on screen or the man seen by his inner circle during filming. By the 1940s, as political controversy overshadowed his Hollywood image, reports about his hygiene faded. Whether that meant his habits changed or the focus simply shifted elsewhere is unclear. Still, the man behind one of cinema's most beloved characters sometimes resembled the tramp in more ways than he let on. If Chaplin carried the stink of the silent era, the next beauty suffered a different kind of studio cruelty that scarred her scalp and soul. Number 1. Rita Hayworth. The studio demanded harsh changes to reshape Rita into a more American star. One of the most damaging was a year-long electrolysis process to raise her hairline, an attempt to erase traces of her natural heritage. The repeated treatments left her scalp scarred and sensitive, triggering a chronic condition known as seborrheic dermatitis. It caused constant flaking, itching, and oily buildup. Maintaining her signature look became a daily struggle. Hair and makeup crews had to develop workarounds to hide the symptoms. Skin-toned powders were brushed along her scalp, and her updos were frequently adjusted to mask irritation or residue between takes. Every close-up required extra care to maintain the illusion of perfection on set. Making matters worse, the red hair that became her trademark wasn't natural. It was the result of intense dyeing with chemicals that only worsened her condition. The treatments left her skin irritated and her scalp inflamed. Even those closest to her, like Orson Welles, acknowledged the toll. He later spoke openly about the discomfort she endured. Pain not for health, but for beauty. Shaped by a system that demanded she change everything to fit its mold. What do you think about the truth behind Hollywood's biggest stars? Does knowing their off-screen habits change the way you see their on-screen charm? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the golden age of fame. And be sure to check out the next video. It's one you won't want to miss.